Shoprite. Let's get this right. We've got to get the order correct. Shoprite, because it's the one that has the market cap close to or around 100 billion rand. Largest retailer in Sub-Saharan Africa by turnover by far. Founded by Christo, Wiese and Whitey Basson, more or less the two of them buying out a Cape-based business in around the 1970s. It has various brands, of course, the Shoprite one originally, but Checkers as well. Somewhere along the line, they picked up Checkers by buying that from the OK Bazaars and so on out of the SAB Miller Group. It also has some secondary brands like U-Save and Hungry Lion, which is a fast foods type joint. There we go. Latest market cap, 101.7 billion rand. Price earnings ratio of 26.3, dividend yield of 1.6. So, Chris, I mean, this one started off on a bit of a rocky footing beginning of the year, seems to have recovered most of that poise, right?
Yeah, I think like a lot of the retailers, Paul, had a big club at the beginning of the year because a lot of the foreign shareholders didn't like what was going on with the consumer spending pattern in South Africa. And as a result, it went right down, it dropped, I've forgotten where it bottomed out. And a lot of these guys.
There's the beginning of the year, about 190 or so, maybe even 200 rand a share, and it kind of drifts lower very sharply there.
Yeah, and it's clawed back an awful lot of it. Maybe not quite back to where, I think it was around about 200 rands a share, if I'm not mistaken, beginning of the year. It's clawed a lot of it back. I think people realize that the great attraction of this stock isn't necessarily in South Africa per se. It's in the rest of Africa. These guys have got first mover advantage in what is probably the most difficult retailing jurisdiction anywhere in the world. That is Africa. And they're represented in about 17 different countries in Africa. So I think what is now happening is this realization's coming in that they're going to get the growth in Africa, they're going to participate in that. But secondly, because of the fact that you're getting paid in relatively speaking currencies that are doing better than the rand, you're going to get a rand a hedge element to this as well. So I think Shoprite is now being perceived for what it is, a really exceptionally high quality company with a lot of potential growth built into it.
Because what you're implying is South Africa is a very well-oiled machine, all the distribution centers, all of the different models, and they customize the offering depending on the nature of the store, more towards the dry goods or towards the groceries or whatever. In Africa, they've built big stores in Lagos and some of these other substantial capital cities, and there the opportunity is somewhat different because they sell everything. Yeah. I mean, in Lagos, those big Shoprite Checkers, you can just see the photographs of them inside. They're absolutely packed because the alternative is for people to buy that stuff on the street side and all sorts of informal environments. So they pioneered these kind of big South African style malls with parking lots, security, big, well-ventilated stores, and you can buy everything from a chess set to running shoes and everything else in between.
And as somebody reminded me the other day, Shoprite sold more champagne in Lagos last year than they did in the whole of South Africa.
That's right, because champagne is a major seller in Nigeria, and I didn't realize Shoprite Checkers are selling that.
Yeah. Well, they don't do an awful lot of it in South Africa, but they do an awful lot of it in Nigeria. Yeah. So there's a market for it there. And as you rightly say, they sell pretty much the entire gamut. But you have to do that because supply lines, logistics are of nightmare proportions in the rest of Africa. And that's why I say, because they've earned their spurs, they've been in there for almost 20 years now in the rest of Africa. They've understood intimately what it takes to win there, and as a result they can put that entire range in.
And that's presumably very scalable, because once you've worked out how to deal with Ghanaian customs or Nigerian clearing and settlement and forwarding and so on, then you can scale that to a larger number of stores. It's almost more a question of getting good sites than it is knowing how to do the business.
Getting sites in Africa, that doesn't matter where you are. Let's not forget, Africa is a continent of 54 countries, 2,000 different languages, and the sheer physical size, it can swallow up the whole of the US, plus India, plus China, and quite a few other things built in. The logistical challenges are just so enormous, it's incredible. And that's why I say, these guys have been in there, they've paid their dues, they understand the difficulties, and in most instances surmounted them.
Let's talk about the international investor base and its standing there. So what you implied earlier was the beginning of the year, for some reason after a fantastic run, there were some negative trends in festive season sales, and all of these stocks fell in a heap, and it looked quite similar across the emerging markets. So there was a kind of combination of local and international factors. Since then, we've had a bit of a recovery, but it seems to me that international investors, when they look at the Africa retail story, have two choices. The one is Massmart and the other is Shoprite. Shoprite appears to have a better operational track record. Massmart, of course, has got the Walmart owning 51%, and for some people that's a big plus. But do you think that Shoprite is going to be seen in future as the preeminent Africa retailer and the one-stop shop for people to come in and buy that story?
I think it already is, but make no mistake, Massmart has got a fantastic track record as well. They've been in for a long time, not as long as Shoprite, but they've also learned an awful lot in the past few years, past 5-10 years. They get about, 7-8% of their earnings out of Africa, so similar degree of earnings out of the African continent. But I think Shoprite probably more successful, and I think if you had to back a winner out of those two, my bet would probably be Shoprite, at least in the short term.
And one final question, I know we're out of time for this one already, but what about management? I mean, Whitey Basson has really done a superlative job. He's at the top of his game. He's even let his hair grow long now. You know, he's got no question that can possibly faze him at any juncture. But, I mean, to what extent is the business dependent on him? If he were to, goodness forbid, have a heart attack and be carried out, would that be a major negative for the business?
Would be a major negative. He's in his mid to late 60s. He shows no signs of tiring whatsoever. And I think he's one of these classical CEOs that, provided his health is good, and it appears to be, he's still incredibly hungry. And that is so important in this game. I'm not as yet clear as to who his named successor would be, if at all. And that may be perceived as being a little bit of a weakness in this whole thing. So yeah, look,
he's chances are, as long as he's been there probably are 4 or 5 guys that are his divisional chiefs that are probably pretty experienced.
Yes. They've got strength and depth across the group.
Okay, so hot on this one?
Oh, this is hot.
Definitely.
Very
At
hot.
180 or wherever it is now, it's got potential to go back to those highs.
I think